Have you ever thought of doing a binding spell on your husband, boyfriend, girlfriend to bind them to you so they would never leave your side? So today I will be speaking to you on the dark side of a binding spell. So stay with me. Hi everyone, I am Eve the Medium. Welcome to my channel. If you're interested in learning more about spirituality, I invite you to subscribe below and also click the notification bell to be notified when any of my new videos are up. I know most of you have heard of a love binding spell, and maybe some of you have not. What is a love binding spell? A binding spell is exactly as it sounds, binding someone to you. The reason why so many men and women are obsessed with binding spells is because they have been told that these binding spells will bind the person to them. The person will never leave them. The person will never abandon them. The person will never look at anybody else. Yes, that is correct. But there is another side to the binding spell that maybe you have not been told about. And I recently did a video on this, on the consequences of a binding spell. And it seems that it went through one ear and out the other, because so many people have DM'd me, messaged me, wanting to do binding spells. Yes, I know how to do binding spells, but I refuse to do them. And I gave the reasons in my previous video. But there is a dark side to these binding spells that a lot of people do not tell you. You may go to a worker and ask for a binding spell, and they will not even ask you why you want a binding spell, or they will not even tell you the consequences of a binding spell. And what are the consequences? For those of you who are watching this video for the first time and have not watched my previous video, the consequences are this person can become violent, aggressive, hateful. The person can completely turn the opposite. Instead of loving, kind, they can become very hateful towards you. And it can also end in violence because the person can become aggressive. In my previous video, I mentioned that a man or a woman that is under a binding spell can become extremely violent and aggressive towards the person that had the spell done. Another thing that you may not know is that a binding spell is not only performed on the person that you have chosen. This binding spell is done on both. So both of you are being binded together, tied together, in case you didn't know. What is the dark side of a binding spell? What happens if this person has a generational curse, an attachment, dark entity attached to them? When that binding spell is performed and certain things are not done prior to, anything that's affecting that person in a negative way, meaning either an attachment, the person has financial problems, bad luck. So anything going on in that person's life, anything negative, will also be transferred to you. So meaning if that person has an attachment or a generational curse, you are going to experience those symptoms. If that person has the dark entity, I've seen this, that dark entity will start creating problems in your life as well. So if that person is going downhill, you're going to go downhill with them. If that person is experiencing bad luck, you're going to experience bad luck as well. If that person is going through financial loss, you're going to be experiencing that as well in your life. Be aware of that. And aside of that, you're going to be dealing with an angry person by your side. So now you're both, again, are going downhill, experiencing all these issues. You're taking your beat down, and sometimes it can even end up in tragedy. I mean, I've seen a lot of relationships end up very badly because of binding spells. I've heard of so many people have regrets about binding spells. In my previous video, I also mentioned binding spells do not make someone love you. If someone doesn't love you, you can do all the spells in the world, you can do all the witchcraft in the world, and that person is not going to love you. Because love is an emotion, is a feeling. And if it's not there, there is nothing we can do to make that person love you. You cannot force someone to love you. You must first love yourself. Most of the time, binding spells are done out of insecurity because you're afraid that person might leave. If you're living in that fear that that person one day or the other can leave you, that means that there's no love in that relationship. And most likely God has somebody else there for you. I also mentioned in my other video that if, God forbid, something happens to that person that you bind it to you and that person passes away, which is something I also have heard of people that have come to me that have told me they have done binding spells and their spouse or partner passed away, they do not leave them alone. After that, they're constantly in their dreams. It affects the other relationships. So they basically end up being alone. There is no reason why you should bind someone to you. There's so many love spells to enhance a relationship, to strengthen a relationship, to protect a relationship without having to bind someone to you. I have had People contact me wanting to bind someone that they do not even have a relationship with. They want that person to fall in love with them. Impossible. There are things that can be done to attract that person to you. But if there's no love, that person's going to leave. I've had people come to me telling me that they have done bindings on a married man so they could leave their wife. And what happens? The man never leaves their wife. The strongest witchcraft in the world, the strongest spell, is love. If there is love, that person is going to be with you regardless, rain or shine. But again, if you want to protect your relationship, there's so many ways to go about it, and we're here to help. But be very cautious when looking into binding or thinking of binding someone to you. You may be binding more than you bargained for. You may be binding a generational curse. You may be binding a dark entity that is attached to that person. And then what? Think very well before going to someone and asking for a binding spell. A lot of people will not tell you this, but I am telling you, you do not want to have to experience it. There is a dark side to binding spells. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I hope it has shed some light on the truth of binding spells and the dark side of binding spells. If you have, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. God bless you. And as always, I wish you much love and light.